Hey, Dave.
Hey, Gary. Going.
Good, good. Just getting ready to jump on a video with or conferencing call with Shauna with
Oh, good, good, good.
yeah, with the training and stuff that she's been doing.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry, I was on mute there. How are you? Good afternoon. We'll give it a minute or so, just see if people filter in, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay, sorry, Sean. I was on a conversation.
Not a problem. It looks like it's us, and then of course Belinda's on as well.
Yeah, Joe just tried calling, and I'm not sure that they may be in a appointment or something. I'm not sure what he was calling for. So, is my can you just tell me, is Smart University background, is it the right direction?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I flip that around properly.
Okay. And Scott did reach out to me this morning, just that stating, wondering if I was going to postpone because I think there's a military flyover scheduled at 1:00. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
I hadn't really planned on changing anything for something like that. Yeah.
I wasn't, I knew about it, but I didn't plan on, I mean, if you live in Layton, which he does, there's a flyover about every 10 minutes.
Right. Right.
So, but I guess, whatever, that's fine.
Right.
Not a problem. So we certainly can go through it, and you can record it and have it ready for anybody else, and then they can come back in however they want to do it. So.
Sounds good. We'll do that for those watching flyover or dealing with business stuff or whatever that may be. I'll just hop into it. I'll try and snap through this. This session in particular is going over different tools. And
Okay.
again, I do these very high level because again, if you're going to really go full on, you can spend hours on each individual tool. And then of course, via Condias, you're off on your own and then you've forgotten what you've learned.
Sure.
So it's be a refresher to be at least familiar, and then we'll go into how they're used when people are working individual projects.
Okay.
This first one is an FMEA, which is failure mode and effects analysis. And frankly, I use this tool a lot. Even when I'm not working on a formal project, it's a really helpful tool. It looks, frankly, it's a souped up spreadsheet is all it really is. And what you do is you take these individual, sorry, let me move. the individual process steps from this column all the way on the left, the process step input, you're just taking all the individual steps in your process map and filling them in down ways, like, again, back to the sandwich analogy of,
Right.
piece of bread, with jelly, piece of bread with peanut butter, all those kinds of things. And then you're going across for each individual step in a process, and you're evaluating potential failures, the effects of those failures, obviously potential causes, and then of course controls in place. And then you're rating them, that severity, occurrence, I need to move things around, I can't see everything. So severity, occurrence, and detection columns, those are really thin columns because those are ones where you just assign a number. And so severity, for instance, obviously what the step is, the potential failure mode, what can potentially go wrong, what's the effect of that if that goes wrong, is it something severe, something, or whatever that may be. And then the severity, when you're assigning in the columns where you do the numbers, which again is severity, occurrence, and detection, is usually the standard is, and it doesn't have to be exactly that, you assign a 1, 3, or a 1, a 5, or a 10. 1 is low severity, 5 is medium, and of course 10 would be high.
So you're only using the 3 numbers then?
Really only the 3 numbers, and the reason, because basically you're rating everything low, medium, and high. There are people who they'll just do odd numbers and do 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, just so that, or excuse me, 9, so that they can get more nuanced. But it's been my experience that really pick 3 numbers. I mean, you could use 5, 20, and 100. It doesn't really matter. But the point is, by the time you're done and all the numbers go across that very furthest column, all the way there on the right, that RPN column, that totals up. There's a formula in there that captures all the different numbers where you're rating them and assigns basically a severity number, or call it what you may, for how severe something is going to impact your business, or your processes. This has been really useful, and quite frankly, even if it's just I can walk into something, and we've all been there, where you walk in and you think, I know what's wrong with this process. Well, this can either confirm or, quite frankly, even confirm that, or it can show where there's potential for other things that you may not have thought of been an impact, but when you really sit and pick it apart, there is some. And again, obviously, potential causes, you're just filling in what the potential causes are. But then for the current controls, that's what's important. And then of course, detection, those 2 are important. Of course, are there controls in place to make sure that you're mitigating risk and potential failures in that particular step of a process. And then detection, that when you're assigning that number, is how easily are you going to able to detect it? For instance, you can say, well, we've got audits in place, but geez, we only run it once a year. Then realistically, yeah, you'll get it eventually, but it may, if you just run your audit, you're not going to see it for a while.
Yeah.
So again, it just shows how robust all of that is. And so that's what that FMEA is. And like I mentioned, it is something that I do hop in and out of on a regular basis, because it's like we've mentioned before, when you walk in with a feeling, oh, I have a feeling this isn't going to work well, and all this, that's really great, for that squishy thing. But boy, it's hard to argue with. I know this is a place where this whole process is most likely to fail. Let me tell you why. And you've really got actual data behind it. You can pull up the FMEA, impress people, and all that great stuff.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay. Pareto chart is obviously not exclusive to Lean Six Sigma. That's a pretty basic business tool. Anyone who's runs Excel, I'm sure, has used a Pareto chart. But again, that's where we talk about the critical few affecting the larger point, the larger group. That's the 80-20 rule. Right. And again, this is just an option to do. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on a Pareto, because I think most of us are familiar with Pareto at that point.
That's the only Pareto I know, is the 80-20.
Right. And that's exactly what it is. And And again, oh, there goes,
There you go.
they hit Salt Lake too. Well, perhaps poor choice of words. Made it to Salt Lake. And then of course SOPs is a tool, and I think we're all very familiar with SOP, standard operating procedures. One thing I put on here that I want to point out though is that second bullet point, that reviewed and signed off by the entire team. When working a project, a very robust SOP is much more likely to be inclusive, truly capture everything you need to do, as well as be used if the team involved in that would normally be expected to use it, the team involved is actually involved in the writing process. Now, that's not to say they're necessarily the one sitting writing everything out, and they may very well be. Or it may just be they've been consulted, it's been written, they've been given the opportunity to review to make sure that whoever's working the project hasn't forgotten anything. And Kaizen, we've got a few folks, we've got at least one, well, former client now, but who uses that term. And Kaizen is just a Japanese term in Lean Six Sigma for improve, and it just means improvement, making improvements. And I'll talk here about having Kaizen events. Again, Kaizen is just a strategy of it's the picking apart, brainstorming, whatever you call it. I had a lady I worked with a few years back who made the comment, and I mentioned her before actually. She's like, I don't want to have to learn a new language to be able to do my job. And you don't, as long as we know it means improvement, that's all it is. Some folks just want to stick with the English and say we're making improvements. Others like being able to say, hey, we're having a Kaizen event. It sounds fancy and shiny, right? And along those lines, Kaizen events, and a lot of us probably have already been involved with something that could either be a formal Kaizen event or even something that is more informal and not necessarily called a Kaizen event, but really that's what it is, where you're just sitting down and in some cases just brainstorming. Hey, we've got something going on. We have a change we want to make, something we want to improve, looking for ways to bring new people in, all these different things. In one case, gosh, a few years ago, I was involved where a division of, again, this is me when I worked for JCPenney, and their divisions are thousands of people. They were restructuring an entire division. I was part of a Kaizen event, and that was a full 2-day event because that was a pretty big, massive, lot of working parts type of project, where it's like, let's sit down, let's pick it apart. What do we need to, not only what do we need to do, what do we need to worry about, that FMEA part, where can we potentially fail if we don't take care of things, dot our I's, cross our T's, who do we need to evolve, all of those things. So a Kaizen event can be something very highly structured like that, because again, that was a very complex project. Or it could be just something as simple as, hey, something didn't work well, let's sit down for half an hour and brainstorm and figure out what that is. And that is a form of Kaizen event. And it is a tool. It is a tool within Lean and Lean Six Sigma. And again, this stuff is not rocket science. It's having conversations with people. Again, offering those 3 questions that I mentioned so often. Where are the successes? What are the challenges? And what about that magic wand piece of it? If you could change anything with your magic wand, your business magic wand, what would you change? And asking that, and say, hey, let's dig in there and go through and do that. And again, Kaizen events are really helpful. And I'll say that it's been my experience, with a few exceptions, like the lady I mentioned who was very resistant to something in a foreign language, having something say, hey, we're going to have a Kaizen event. First of all, it's an event, right? Ooh, events are special. And Kaizen just makes it a little shinier, right? You can do it with clients, you can do it internally, whatever that may be. But hey, especially for you folks in sales, being able to walk in and say, and talking about we improve processes, we increase efficiencies. How do you do that? Well, we can do things like we can help you host Kaizen events. Really, what's that? That's another opportunity to talk about getting in and improving things. And again, this is like Lean Six Sigma 101. This is a very basic tool, basic strategy, but again, it's brainstorming essentially is what it is. So, all right, SWOT analysis, again, not exclusive to Lean Six Sigma by any stretch of the imagination. And I won't spend a lot of time here because I think everyone here is familiar with it, but SWOT analysis are, again, this is a tool I use on a regular basis because I want to look and see what we're doing, whether it's working with an individual client, if I'm working with an individual team or person, sometimes process person, whatever. SWOT analysis are helpful. Many of you have probably seen something along these lines. And of course, if I were to ask you to count to 50 with this as it is, that will be a bit of a challenge. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide. And of course, if you arrange it, even with different fonts, different sizes, or even if it were different colors, it would be pretty apparent that you could count to 50 pretty quickly, or even identify if there were missing numbers. Which is why, again, speaking to the choir, right? Organization is so important. I'll flip through these slides relatively quickly, but these are just examples of when you use 5S, and I'll talk here to a minute what the S's stand for specifically, which again, they were initially given Japanese terms, but their English equivalents, they're all S's as well that they've managed to come up with. And again, we've all toured client sites where you've got something that's more like on the left where they're cluttered, they're tight quarters, you're cramped, you have to weave in and out. You see employees all over the place and it looks a little bit like an anthill just because it looks very busy, so to speak. And then of course, there's the ones that are organized, neat, big spaces and all of that. 5S certainly can't give you more space in a building. Your space is limited to what your square footage is, of course, but the organization can, of course, help you use it the best you possibly can and use your space wisely. And again, examples of that, I won't spend a lot of time there, so get in and out of that. One thing I will say though is 5S applies to warehouses, it applies to construction sites, any type of work sites. It applies to business office environments, whether it's a small office or those big massive cubicle farm kind of places where you've got an entire floor of cubicles. It's that organization again. Let me flip through here again. And again, examples of that in an office and having areas taped off, separated out, very, very specifically labeled for what their use is. Labeling, I'll repeat, should always be multilingual. If you've got a large amount of your staff and employees that speak another language, whether it tends to be Spanish is the one we encounter most, but depending on the area, it may not necessarily be Spanish. We want to make sure anything that's labeled is labeled in the appropriate languages to make sure we're covering everyone. Then of course, the thing with the wrenches, that pegboard we've seen, of course, you see, mechanics, garages, things like that. That's a pretty common thing for them. Because of course, and again, this is a lean principle. If you have 5 mechanics working in a shop, an auto body shop, you're not going to buy 5 complete sets of tools. Of course not. You have everything up. It's available for them to use. They use back and forth. Now, if something's a very common tool that is used a lot, maybe you may have multiples of that particular tool, but you're not going to buy 5 complete sets. I will say though, however, inversely, in an office environment, we tend to duplicate tools that we don't necessarily need to duplicate. In our offices are smaller, we tend to do that a little bit less, although we do it a bit. When you get into the big cubicle farms, they tend to be the ones that are most guilty. But again, do we really need a set of scissors at every desk, a stapler, a tape dispenser, all of those kind of office type of tools? And in some cases, I've seen office environments where they'll put garbage cans in central locations as opposed to a garbage can at every desk, because if we're all in a paperless society, do we really need all of that extra clutter? It's an additional business expense, and quite frankly, requires maintenance and upkeep and all of that. Oops, see if I can get that to go. And again, we use it in our home. We've all seen this before. That great little silverware organizer is it's lean. It's Lean Six Sigma. Part of 5S is red tagging. And I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with red tagging, but red tagging is basically just something, a methodology so that when you go through that whole 5S process, which again starts with sorting things out, you're determining what you're going to keep, what's, you know, it's broken, just trash it, or no, it's not broken, not going to trash it, we might need it, we're going to put it in a holding area. Those holding area kind of things get red tagged. And some businesses will do, and they'll buy those formal tags and they'll fill them out, and actually even Mr. Bourne from Sevilla Fine Foods actually asked me, where can I buy those tags? That's a fantastic idea. And I go, well, my buddy Google can tell you who has those. Because it's a pretty simple thing. I've also seen companies not go quite so formal as to get the formal thing that you fill out a tag. They bought just red stickers and stuck a red sticker on it, or they have those red plastic tape that they could just tie on there, something to identify. And then they either identify, it could be something like this kind of dilapidated old shelf that becomes a red tag area. We'll set those things, and that's our holding area. Big cubicle farm type of environment, I've seen them dedicate an empty cubicle to be a red tag area. Warehouses, I've seen, and open sites, I've seen them have, they may have a storage shed that they may use, or it may just even be a corner of a shed or a closet, storage closet they use, that this is the red tag area. It's not necessarily they're devoting a great amount of space to something like that, because quite frankly, the idea is it's a holding area just to make sure you're not just going crazy and tossing everything only to find out you need it later. And of course, it's to each organization and process owner to determine what that hold time is. It may be a month, it may be 6 months, or it's usually not quite that long, but it could be whatever it is. You can also red tag folders. How many of us are guilty of, and I certainly have been in before, where I need a file, but you got to go through layers of folders, this folder to this folder to this folder to this folder to finally get to that. How many layers? I mean, and we all do it for the sake of organization, but again, how much time are we wasting? You think, well, it's not that much, but when you have people who that's what they do for living and they're pulling different things out, it's slowing them down. It's extra steps in a process. All right, so, and again, tag it if you can, and this is what the 5 S's are. Again, I put those Japanese terms in there just so that you can see them. Certainly don't expect anyone to memorize them. I'll be honest, I certainly have not. But it is just that, first of all, sort through things, again, whether it's virtual, like something like files in a computer, or physical things. Sort through what you've got, determine what you've got. Then determine, is it something that you need to keep? Is it something that is broken, is definitely of no longer use? It needs to be tossed or donated, depending on what's applicable. Or it's in that nebulous area, that kind of gray area, so it's going to go in a holding area, so you're going to tag it, so to speak. And again, virtual tags, I've seen even in companies that have share drives where a lot of people are sharing drives, they'll create a red tag folder. So you're like, it doesn't look like anyone's even touched this file. I'm going to throw it in the red tag folder. And again, every month or two, there's someone deemed responsible for verifying and dumping things out. So again, keeping server space down and network space down, so companies aren't continually doing things over and over, because sometimes you end up with duplicates of files and all those things. And of course, we're all, myself included, guilty of that on occasion. Are any of you familiar with 5S or have done anything with 5S? No.
No, not me.
And I'll be honest, it's a great opportunity to speak about it with clients. And I know we do have some clients at 5S. And again, you don't have to go into, I need to be a full lean black belt before I understand 5S. It's just a concept. You're organizing and sorting. Anyone who's, as a kid, has had to clean your own room and has your mother standing over you telling you to clean your room, you 5S'd your room. That's basically what it is. Did you tag it and set it aside to a holding area? Probably not, but it's a version of that, right? It's just organization. All right, and again, more examples of this, and some people will color code things, some don't. I have worked again in those cubicle farm areas where they've not only 5S, you know, they're like, oh, we've got a big influx of people, we're hiring 50 new people. That's 50 more staplers, 50 more this, 50 more this, whatever, whatever. Again, JC Penney working in an accounting and service center. There's a thought process to think everyone needs a 10 key at their computer, at their workstation. Well, 10 keys are expensive, and guess what? They don't need 10 keys because everything they're doing is internally in their computer software. Nobody uses a 10 key. In the 4 years I worked there, once I heard a 10 key going off. Very early morning, I was there like 6 a.m. and heard somebody's 10 key just going like crazy. And I walked over to see what she was doing because I thought, wow, I never hear that. And I went over and I asked, I go, wow, you're using your 10 key. And she goes, I'm balancing my checkbook. She come in early and just wanted to balance her checkbook. So by creating something that in lean terms is called a Kanban, basically a central station, kind of like those ped boards, but for office supplies. So, hey, I need some scissors. I can go grab scissors from that central area, use them, and then put them back. I don't have to buy 50 sets of something or 40 sets or whatever it is, or even 10 or 5, because again, those little things, sometimes we nickel and dime ourselves with something because we have this thought that we have to have these things. And again, part of being lean is trimming things down, being simple, and with both your physical things and your virtual things like files. And again, going into the whole thing of the shine, sometimes it's called sweep, is just organizing and keeping it clean. We have more than one client that I would love to see them do a little bit of this, but it's just the more than once we've talked certainly in leadership meeting about a particular client and having similar issues or similar incidents repetitively, and it's been brought. I've been asked, well, what do you think they need? And I go, a lot of times it's housekeeping. It's the shine piece of 5S. Just if the area is clean, you're gonna reduce your incidents. You're gonna be more efficient because people, if areas are clean, people are gonna be able to maneuver the areas. Even areas like clients like Visible that have these nice big open aisles, which is great. But if somebody parked pallets in the middle of an aisle and people are wandering in between, it slows things down. That's basically what it becomes. And then of course, this is important, standardizing. Standardize those, helps standardize your processes, standardize your things, your processes, your folders, all those things. Like the group I was talking to this morning, talking with them, we've got a lot of people that do very similar roles, have similar roles. There are some things you can standardize pretty easily. There's some things you standardize, but at a higher level. And sales is a good example of that. There's certain steps you have to do. Every sales from start to finish, there's certain steps that have to be followed. That's where you standardize. Now, of course, those nuances, that how you achieve those, how you work with each individual client, that's where your nuance comes. And obviously you can't standardize something like that. But some things that our folks do, like, onboarding a new, whether you're onboarding a client, there's obviously certain information you have to have. Onboarding an employee, there's certain information we have to have. We have, it's required, it's regulatory, right? So standardize what you can standardize as much as possible, and it leaves all those other areas where you've got to negotiate and all that. It's easier because the other stuff is a no-brainer. It's standardized, you've got a process in place. So by doing that, it helps everything else.
SOPs, right?
Yes, SOPs are a big part of that standardization, absolutely. And y'all get to hear me tomorrow as we wrap up, talk about sustainability to the point you think you can't hear about it anymore. And the last part is sustainability. And we've all seen versions of charts like this, and this is just a version of a 5S chart, which is, again, I've seen companies where they have like Friday afternoons at 4:45, end of the business week. Everybody stop work, and we're going to 5Sing the area. We're 5Sing. If you're in a production area, you're 5Xing the production area. If you're in an office area, you're 5Sing the office area, which could include files and things like that. But basically taking a couple of minutes, setting aside, it could be done weekly, daily, monthly, even yearly, just depending on what it is. And any of us that have visited facilities that have forklifts, they have a version of this because it's that checklist, right? How often has something been serviced? Public restrooms, they often, the inside of the door will have something, it's been cleaned this time, this date. It's that checklist. How often is something being taken care of? That's what something like this is. We see these in, in real life, so to speak, all the time.
I think we need one of those up in Layton branch. Last time I was up there, Scott needs to clean and wipe and vacuum.
All right. We probably need that in a couple. And, along those lines, like, how do you know it's been done?
Carrie, that's already been addressed.
It's okay. I was just kidding.
Well, Carrie, I will say, for your convenience, I did make sure every office has gloves. So if you feel like everything's grubby, you can always throw on a pair of gloves.
Good.
And ideally we won't. And I've actually made the comment to someone relatively recently that I went into, I didn't say it to the client, of course, but I stopped into a client restroom to wash my hands. And I'll be honest, the grocery store restroom I was in 3 or 4 weeks prior to do same thing, wash my hands, was 100 times cleaner. And of course had that chart on the back of the door, right? It's about, and it's not just about cleaning, it's about all the different processes you have. It again, maintenance on forklifts, checklists, things like that. That's what that's about. So I whipped through that extremely fast because that was, again, a very high level version of all of these different, we actually this morning did the full hour. This is a very high level, very fast version of all of these different tools. But that 5S, again, it's a really powerful tool, not only to use and implement as part of a project, but to walk through a door when you're dealing with a client. If you can talk about 5S and talk about that organizational, helping them organizational, and again, we're increasing efficiencies, right? This is a method to do that. So being able to do that, particularly in light of the project, and for those who are working with a project, I mentioned it to the group this morning as well, that for all of these individual tools, some projects really are more conducive to using some tools than others. So as people work through different projects and we have those conversations about projects, I can help people say, this is a great place where an FMEA would really help you, or this is a place where, 5S is going to be useful, or whatever the case may be. Makes sense?
Yep.
Sweet. Any questions, comments, deep thoughts?
None so much, but great information so far.
Okay, well, hopefully y'all got to get a bit of a flyover noise, at least, even if we didn't get to see it. And I'm sure it'll be on the news tonight.
My kids are still looking for it. They haven't seen it.
I just heard them come by my place, and I heard them when it came by Shauna's.
Yeah. They were pretty noisy coming through here. I have a window open. I probably should close my windows, but yeah, they definitely came through here. And I'm in Salt Lake, so.
How long ago, Carrie, did they fly over you guys?
About 15 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
That's pretty cool stuff.
So they probably have already been by your spot.
I don't know how we would have missed it because I heard them go over yours, Shauna, and. Yeah. Anyway, the kids are anxious to see it. They've been out there since 1 and still haven't seen anything. So.
No, that's too bad. Okay, well, if there's no questions, again, that was pretty quickly. Tomorrow, again, I'll talk about a couple more tools, then I'll harp at Joe about sustainability quite a bit, then projects and next steps. All right?
Cool.
Okay.
Very good. Thanks, Shauna.
All right. Thank you all.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.